Good evening. I would like to call to order the Committee of Infrastructure for September 26, 2018, here in the Aldermanic Chamber at 7 o'clock. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Alderman Thomas Lopez. Alderman Jan Schmidt is here. Alderman Ernest Jetty.
Here.
Alderman Kenneth Gidge. Here. And our chair, Michael O'Brien.
Present. Okay. At this point in the meeting, we have a portion for public comment. Is there anybody wishing to come up to bring up any comments, particularly on items that are going to be discussed by the board this evening? Ma'am? When you come to the microphone, ma'am, could you please state your name and your address, please, for the record?
Absolutely. Hello, my name is Patty Falbo-Tupin. I live at 123 Conant Road.
Did you want to speak?
Oh, right now?
You can.
Oh, I was going to wait until the discontinuance comes up.
Okay. All right, then.
Does that work?
We could allow that.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Thank you.
I guess we could do that, yeah.
Sure.
We're not a particular thing.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Anybody else? Mr. Cutter? Yes, sir.
It's a letter to Alderman O'Brien. I'm Jim Cutter, 86 Palm Street, Nashua. Dear Alderman O'Brien, we are victims of a city building inspector's mistake of approving a permit in our absence that gave our neighbors, the Gilbertsons, a near 3-foot wide strip of our driveway. Since then, they have been violating RSA 31:102, obstructing access to highways. And we have taken years presenting our problem to the city when it needs only a short time to fix. Note, this could have been prevented if the person processing the permit had made sure it matched the deed. The assessing department corrected the Gilbertsons' tax map in 2007 after my visits. I have been told by the police it would be easy to solve by an officer with a paper from City Hall who would order them to remove their fence and tin shed from our property in compliance with the above named law. Our house was built on a lot that was more or less 30 feet long, with a 3-foot long gap that became our property of 33 feet, which is 2 rods. By using the lone door on our porch that made the DeRocha family walk out the north side of our house onto the gap for 20 years between 1942 and 1962, per statute of limitation. When the city building inspector approved the permit for Jim Gilbertson, it may have caused him to think he had the gap of vacant land he had been dreaming about. But he would have been wrong, because a gap of vacant land will never be found in a driveway. And the Gilbertsons needed to know a gap is always found at the end of the last dimension of a deed and never relocated. Thus, the actual dimension was the 51 feet property line required by National Ordinance Section 36, plats, on the May 13th, 1971 Karen/Gilbertson building permit. The National Charter, Section 45, has, quote, mayor, general duties, etc. Quote, he shall enforce the ordinances of the city, this charter, and all general laws applicable to the city. This would be an easy way to correct the Gilbertsons' mistake. C, quote, the offense officially made by a public servant, unquote, and RSA 626:3, number 2. Effect of ordinance or mistake, and the mayor has an obligation to enforce the ordinances. Sincerely. Jim, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cutter. Anybody else who would like to have a public comment before the board? Seeing none, we're going to close the public comment portion. At this point, on our agenda is a discussion on the overnight parking update. Would you like to please come forward? You may join us in one of the seats available. And again, when you come up to speak, can you just give your name and everything else? I do advise the city clerk that you have your own part on the agenda, but this is an update from Mr. Cummings and his representative. Thank you.
Jill Stansfield, Parking Manager, Economic Development Division. I wanted to come this evening to give you an update on the overnight parking and some of the progress we are making and still working towards in our department. Parking, folks may now call in later to be granted overnight exception. It is noted on the website as well. The website, and if you don't mind, I'll read you what is on the website. Requests must be received by 11 p.m. to be considered for same-day exception. We encourage residents to call in by 4 p.m. if possible. If you are unable to call in before 11 p.m., the 11 p.m. cutoff, but still need an emergency overnight exception to park on street, you may still call. If your call is received between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m., you may receive a ticket, but you are welcome to call the parking department the following day to discuss the matter. So we will take that into consideration, but it would be on a case-by-case basis. We are also in the process of gathering input from the Board of Aldermen members with regards to thoughts surrounding how we move forward with overnight parking in other neighborhoods. We are looking at exploring the possibility of a temporary permit program for those who may need additional parking during the summertime when college students return home from school, construction purposes, other special circumstances. We're looking to draft a proposal to have ready for you next month. And another good piece of information, we have implemented issuing warnings to all first-time offenders for overnight parking.
Oh, very good. It appears to me we're heading in the right direction. I'm not saying nobody's going to get a ticket here, but the thing is, we're doing it in such a way and accommodating the public. Even in the future, looking into some form of permitted type of situations, such as little Johnny comes back from college with a car and everything, and there isn't enough room in the driveway. I think that's more thinking and along the lines that we need. Again, my personal opinion, it's an asset when you don't have parking on the street. But then again, there are needs, and there are certain times, and certain neighborhoods definitely need to have overnight parking needs, because just of the way the older part of the city was laid out at that particular time. So this seems to be splitting it pretty good. So I compliment you, thank you. I'll stay in contact with Mr. Cummings, see if there's any, I'd like to hear from other members of the board, and maybe we can have this come up with as a, one of our projects, a work in progress. Alderman Lopez.
Yeah, I just want to make some comments because I was involved in the Infrastructure Committee's previous discussions of this. Some of the ideas that I would like to see return is a city-wide approach to parking, because there are some areas that don't want it, that it doesn't make sense to put it there, and there are some areas that absolutely want it, and they don't, they're not even anywhere near a city garage. I think at least coming up with a strategy based on density and use would be helpful to a lot of people. One of the, and again, citywide, because if we were able to communicate zones for rules, some places might be some zones that are more urban and dense. You buy a monthly, or you buy an annual pass and you use it. Some places you may not actually need parking the whole time. You may have X number of cars. So I think taking each zone into account will help alleviate a lot of confusion. without creating the need for a lot of stickers and a lot of inflexibility. If somebody in the tree streets, for example, has a parking pass and we allow permanent parking in another area of the city, that person can park there too if they're visiting or if they want to leave their car there, or any number of things. So having zones so that not only is the rules and conditions specific to that area, but you can make sure that your neighbors and people that live nearby are parking in front of your house. Those are things that a lot of constituents were pretty verbal about last time we spoke. And then additionally, it was also referenced as zones, but it was more on each street. Instead of painting a specific parking space and the associated costs and difficulties of planning that out, designating a part of the street where people could park in general was an idea that was discussed. So you would paint a line in one area, and maybe 200 feet down the road, you would paint another one, and you put signage saying within these areas you can park. So those are just things that I wanted to bring up because they were discussed previously. And I also wanted to express some sympathy for the complexity of this problem because everybody needs parking who has a car. You know, people have cars because they can't walk to X, Y, or Z. People with handicaps, particular mobility issues, have more challenges than others when it comes to getting to and from their vehicles. But the roads are only so wide. We need to make sure that fire trucks and ambulances and the like can get through. And we also need to make sure that we create a system that can't be abused by people who just pay for a parking pass and then use it for vehicle storage wherever they want. So there's a lot of different factors at play, you know, even down to the making sure we have the right number of stickers, making sure that they can be easily read and identified. So to the public, I would just say have patience because we're working on it. Identify the areas that we need to work on and your preference for it, but it's a very complicated problem.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Very well. Anybody else would like to comment? Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, I would like to, I would like, to say that I know we're working on it and nothing has been finalized, but it sounds like we may be approaching this in a unnecessarily complicated manner. I'm not sure. I think we should have a discussion to revisit the whole idea of why overnight parking is prohibited in the first place. What great evil are we trying to prevent by allowing people to park on the street overnight? I know I've commented before that there was a time when there were a lot less cars, and whoever had a car had a driveway or a garage, and the car was safely parked in the driveway or in the garage at night. And whenever there was a car parked on the street overnight, the police would notice that and be alarmed or think that it was a cause for alarm. But times have changed. There are a lot more cars. I've commented before that I think prohibiting parking has had an unintended consequence in that, now that, where you had one car maximum per house, you now have, several cars, and those single-family houses have been turned into multifamily houses so that there are even more cars. And by prohibiting parking on the street, we've forced people to pave over their lawns, remove hedges and trees. And you drive down some areas of the city and you see all these cars, parked up against the house. And I'm not sure that it makes the city look very attractive. And, I'm not sure that having those same cars parked on the street would be such a bad thing. I understand in the wintertime, when we're dealing with snow removal, that's a special circumstance. But unless the street is so narrow that an emergency vehicle could not proceed down it, I'm not sure that parking overnight would be such a bad thing. But I'm but I'm not sure. I really, and I think that, as we go down this road, so to speak, I think we ought to start from the beginning and say, why do we want to prohibit parking in the first place? There may be very good reasons, and, as some have pointed out, maybe it varies for different parts of the city. I know people have commented that they live on a curvy street, and they're concerned about the ability of emergency vehicles to go down that street. Well, maybe in those areas where the street becomes too narrow in a curve, parking could be prohibited there. Maybe we ought to approach it from the point of view of allowing parking everywhere, but prohibiting it where necessary. So that's my thinking.
Anybody else? Alderman Lopez.
Yeah, some of what was just said I object to because, you represent a specific ward, and I think some of the concerns that might have just been kind of dismissed are very valid in Ward 4, where people are living close together, and sure, some of us have hedges and trees, and that's an interesting, need. But a lot of people live in a small area, and not having emergency vehicle access and not having snow removal is a huge problem in the denser areas. This is why I was saying it would probably be a good idea to take a regional approach, because people living in the other parts of the city may have no idea why we do this. But I would say we've been doing it for a while, and just throwing it out and saying, well, let's try this the other way. Let's just abandon the entire process. It doesn't really account for all of the thinking, hours, time, and planning that have gone into this so far. And I am by no means one of the ones who has put the most into it. But there are good reasons. DPW has studied the width of the roads and the safety. So has the fire department. So has the police. I wouldn't casually dismiss those as great evils. I would say they're doing their job, and they're trying to make sure that streets are passable in the middle of the night when people need help and the least people are available to help. So I tend to, particularly in the neighborhoods that I represent, appreciate that insight and that need. I also have heard from a lot of neighbors who are not particularly excited about having a bedroom adjacent to a street where anybody can park, because that's their space. And unfortunately, they happen to live in a small footprint property where they don't have a lawn or a hedge or anything like that. And so having cars parking right outside with whoever getting out and in and whatever, they're not happy with that. So I would argue that neighborhoods are in very different places and have very different situations going on, and we should not look at this whole thing altogether. I think specific areas where it doesn't serve a purpose, those neighbors should be coming together and saying, we don't really want this in Ward 5 or Ward 3 or Ward 7, if they're willing to. But I think for the most part, where there is restricted park, or where there is overnight parking passes, where people have really needed to advocate for that and have come forward to their alderman and said, can you remove my street, because my street is one that we don't need that for. Any alderman can make an amendment to the pilot program, including a different street. If the movement hasn't been there, then the neighborhood needs to consider communicating with their alderman what their actual needs are. But on behalf of the entire city, I think some of the neighborhoods appreciate the ability of an ambulance or fire department to intervene, because they happen a lot.
Alderman Schmidt.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Parking Manager Stansfield for all the time she has been so gracious. Thank you very much. And I have to agree with Alderman Lopez a great deal. In Ward 1, we have lovely wide streets that are flat and easy, and people would really like to be able to park near them or park on them. There are some places there near the high school or in Nashua North where there's no parking because they were trying to dissuade kids. And I know that there's residents there who would like to park on the street during the day and feel that they can't. So there are special issues everywhere around the city, and this is so complex. it's like shuffling cards at this point, and I really appreciate the gentle way you're doing this, and thank you very much.
Anybody else have any other comment? I would just like to say one thing. I particularly grew up in a very congested neighborhood in Boston, and I've seen firemen get out of fire trucks going through the window, you know what I mean? And my mother, God bless her soul, was the original shoveler of the family parking spot, and, you know, and with Maggie's Drags out there on a post to mark it as the O'Brien territory. But it does get complicated. But I like the methodical way that we're doing it, and I like to continue. But basically, we live in a winter climate, and what about trash day? And somebody leaves their barrel out and forgets to take their barrel in. And then the plow comes down the street, and the windrow is now on the area, 10 feet off your driveway, that you've got to go out into the public street. And it's happened to me and everything else, and not everybody's got to move their cars on, snowy days. So I like the slow tempo to look at it individually, to come to see and to do it. I mean, it would be very easily to blanket and to say, the whole city. But I like to control in the methodical way of doing it right now. And I think we've got some great people on this committee that can probably go right through this and work on this and come up with a good solution for our citizens. So it's a lot to consider, and it's something that needs to be addressed, and I agree. And thank you for everybody's input. Thank you. Okay, seeing no other further comment, communications. There is one. I would like, without objections, to accept the written letter received by James B. and Mary E. Cutter that was read tonight in the opening statement. Without objection, we'll accept it and place on file.
Thank you.
Okay. Unfinished business.
We have none.
Okay. New business resolutions.
We have R18-074, authorizing the city to enter into short-term real property lease agreement with 44 Broad Street.
Okay. Unfortunately, tonight, the endorser of this is the mayor, and he's not here tonight. But seeing no objections to open up on the discussion, I'll have the clerk make a motion on it.
I'd recommend for final passage on this.
Okay, very good. To get everybody up to speed, as you probably very well know, R18-074 is to enter into a temporary lease agreement authorizing the city to enter a short-term real estate property lease agreement for 44 Broad Street, and it will be to a company that is called North Pole Christmas Trees, and they're going to operate their business at 44 Broad Street. So I imagine this is just going to be a temporary seasonal thing, so people can, if they so choose to purchase their Christmas trees, they can go particularly there. Any other comment? Okay, Alderman Lopez.
Last year they paid in trees, and they donated a bunch of trees that we gave out to people who were
Yes.
needy.
Yes.
But we had the lease to show us that, so do we happen to know if that's the case this time?
Yes.
There is a lease, and it is part of, it is on the file in the city.
No, I was just wondering if they're giving trees out to
Yes.
Oh,
like Arlington.
I see.
Yeah,
I
they gave
def-
trees in exchange
Yes.
for the lease, and then
Yes,
they
they
were
are.
given out at Arlington Street Community Center.
Did you read it into
I
it?
did read that.
Okay,
That's exactly
very
what
good.
it's
Thank
aiming
you.
to do. You're very
Thank
welcome.
you. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Very good point.
I think it would be a good idea.
Mhm. Very good point, Alderman Lopez. Okay. Any other further comment on R18-074? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. R18-074 has been approved. New business ordinances.
We have ordinance 18-022, authorizing free holiday parking at meters in Zone 3, which includes the Elm Street and High Street parking garages from December 10th through January 4th of 2019.
Okay. And can I have a motion on that, please?
I'll move to recommend final passage.
All right, and please, can Ms. Stanfield, could you come up and give us the usual holiday version of this, please, and thank you.
Jill Stansfield, Parking Manager, Economic Development Division. So every year we offer free holiday parking for a period of time around Christmas. It's been very successful. There's, in the way of revenue lost, it's been the same for the last few years. That has not changed. And it's actually been very successful. Patrons, I think there's been an increase in patronage downtown during this period, and I think the parking where the free parking is very much used during this period. So I would like to potentially see this become a permanent program because we've been doing it now for 4 years or so, but that's up to you.
Okay.
Alderman Lopez.
All right, Alderman Lopez.
I am interested in making a motion to amend this to go to January 5th because it's a Saturday. So it's not like Merry Christmas, everybody get free parking, and then Saturday, surprise, no you don't. If we at least make it Saturday, then they get Sunday off, and then they can start again on Monday.
We'll put you on the hot seat with that question.
Zone 3 parking is free on Saturdays. So I think that's why we had gone with the January 4th. Is January 4th, is that a Friday?
Yeah. Is it only Zone 3? I
Uh,
thought this was the downtown.
Zone 2 and Zone 3 there's no charge for parking on on the weekends.
That includes Main Street?
Main Street is part of Zone 1.
So
And so-
Zone 1 is not part of it, not Main Street, so the offside streets, all right.
Correct.
So nothing would be gained by doing the 5th.
Correct.
Nothing would be harmed, but I'm not going to make
Right.
the motion.
All right, thank you for your answer. Any other further discussion on 01822? Seeing none, all those who are in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Motion passes. 01822 is adopted.
Next.
Yes.
Next, we have ordinance 18-024, moving the location of a yield sign at the intersection of Walnut Street and Central Street. And I would recommend final passage.
Alderman Lopez, do you have any comment? I know you've done a lot of work with this or anything.
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, basically, the Walnut Street Oval, the yield sign will work better if it is repositioned so that the traffic that needs to yield is yielding. This is in response to a number of people who come rapidly down Central Street into the Oval area and aren't necessarily slowing down or yielding. So the visual reminder will be more effective moved to that area. So that's also a reminder to the public. We're all in a rush, we're all in a hurry, but as soon as you start getting into the trickier, I'm driving around in a circle and I can't see around the end of it and whatever, you might want to slow down. People are probably crossing at the most awkward spots.
And I thank you. I co-sponsored it with you. It looks like a rotary, even though it's an oval, but, you know, the yield, I think that would definitely help out. Thank you. Okay.
That
Any
oval,
other
just to add,
I'm sorry,
also,
Skip.
they've added parking, like striped parking, but also a bike path and like a bike lane, and there's a lot going on in that oval. You should stop and look at it and let whatever cars are already in there continue to travel, just as a matter of safety, just so you can kind of see what's going on with it.
Okay. Alderman Jettie?
I'm familiar with that intersection. I travel there just about every day. And, you know, you're correct, where the yield sign is now doesn't make a lot of sense. But it's a complicated intersection. You've got, you know, people traveling northeast, east-north, from on Central Street onto Walnut Street. And then you've got people coming north on Walnut Street. They have a stop sign. And then cars coming out of West Pearl Street also have a stop sign. And so I'm wondering, where is the yield sign going to appear?
Alderman
This
Lopez?
is where that graphic that I only found this evening would have been good. So I'm going to show this to Alderman Jettie so he can see it specifically, and then forward it so that we can include it in the minutes. That way the public can see it.
So what is, relocate existing yield sign? And what does it say underneath that? Existing yield sign, and what is it?
And one-way sign. Zoom in just by moving your fingers separately.
Oh, okay.
Do you want me to drive?
Yeah. You're better off, yeah.
Will I use this
Let's see
one?
if we can get it up.
Okay,
here
so-
for everybody to see. Oh, there you are.
Okay, so the yield sign's gonna end up over there.
Okay, where is it?
If, bear with us, are you satisfied, Alderman Jettie? We're trying to bring it up on the main board as well.
There's the,
Yeah, that's-
right there.
Right there.
You got it. Looks good to me.
Yeah, right there.
We brought it up on the main board, Alderman Lopez. And I think where you're talking about is from this Walnut Street is that intersection that intersects with West Pearl Street. That's the area in question that you're talking about.
Yep, that's where I'll be moving.
Right. Okay.
And just for the public's knowledge, this confusion is mostly my fault because I asked DPW to give me a quick little write-up for tonight that I meant to forward, and I referred to the wrong ordinance, so they actually translated what I said, even though I got everything wrong on it, and sent me the right information, but it was a delay, and so it only came in this evening.
All right. Is there any other further questions by members of the board? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of 018-024 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 018-024 has been adopted and will be forwarded. Thank you.
Okay, next we have ordinance 18-028, allowing permitted overnight on-street parking indefinitely on those streets where it is temporarily permitted.
Okay, and can I have graciously call before the city clerk? And can you give us a motion, please?
I move for final passage.
Very good, thank you. And our city clerk is here. Can you give us a brief explanation of what this ordinance?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mike, for the record. My name is Patricia Pietza, I'm the city clerk. In 2017, ordinance 17-051 was introduced and added additional streets for a temporary program, to the program temporarily, for a term to expire December 31st, 2018. So when looking at purchasing the passes for this year and everything like that, and knowing that it is still a work in progress with the committee with looking at the whole overnight program, I didn't want those residents that were on those streets to not be able to purchase passes going into 2019. So with Alderman O'Brien's assistance and approaching him, and we had legislation introduced last night at the board level to add these streets permanently at this point to the program. We have reached out to the police department, the fire department, and the Department of Public Works, and none of them have objections to adding these streets permanently. Last night at the Board of Aldermen meeting, we did have additional 6 sponsors sign on to this legislation. So, and at this time, we do have individuals, we have at this point 25 individuals that have purchased passes that are on these temporary streets out of the 367 people that we currently have issued permits to.
And this will make this permanent. These streets will be just like what was on the original bill. This will give them a permanent status, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Right. Alderman Lopez?
I just wanted to say that contrary to my previous comments regarding Alderman Jettie's comments, while I believe that there are areas that should be limited parking, I do not believe we should let this expire, because letting the permanent the pilot program expire means all of the people who can currently park and have the passes to park will not be able to do so next year. So it is the exact opposite. Right now, there is a citywide parking ban, except in this area, where you can buy these purchase these permits. And there's definitely a need for these areas. They've all been very carefully vetted and discussed in committee and had the engineers sign off and all that kind of stuff. So letting this expire and not become a permanent program would be a huge mistake, in my opinion.
Very good. Any additional comment by any member of the board? Seeing none, all those are in favor of 01828 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, 01828 has been approved for final passage. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Pinnish. When the clerk is ready,
Tabled in committee, a motion by myself to take from the table the petition for street discontinuance for a portion of Conant Road.
okay.
Take from
All
the
those
table.
in favor of removing this motion from the table signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion has been moved from the table. We have an additional motion?
I will also move to amend the petition by replacing the plan with a revised plan submitted by the petitioners.
All those in favor of amending the plan by replacing it with the petition from the petitioners of the revised plan submitted, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Oh,
Aye.
I don't know.
well, before I called, I
I don't
did
know what the
recognize
difference
the hand.
is. I don't wanna
The
vote
motion
for it.
was called.
Great.
The motion was called, so, but I will allow you to speak after the vote, okay? All those in signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Alderman Lopez, did you have?
I was just gonna say, if we amend it, now we're talking about the amendment, so, I mean, later, I guess we could defeat our own amendment. I just wanted to save time by finding out what the amendments were. Like, what's the difference?
Okay, yeah, the next, that is coming up a vote as part of the decorum so that you can get a grasp of where we're at. What, by approving this, in my opinion, what we did now took care of what was the original and now brought up what needs to be discussed, because now, what was the original plan, and if the clerk would be so kind as to, if we can bring this up again.
Yeah, I don't know where it is.
Yeah, okay, I'll help you find it. Can you please bear with me, folks? Okay.
that it?
Yeah. Mhm. My left hand doesn't work too good, folks. Okay. Now what we have before us is the plan, the new plan that has come up, okay? And to explain this, how many people here are the petitioners with this? Okay. I'll allow you to come up and you can speak to this.
My name is Ed Gilbertson. I live at 121 Conant Road, and I'm representing myself as well as Michael Fournier, who lives at 119 Conant Road. This petition is for a partial discontinuance. It's only 2 of the 4 properties shown. In 2003, Conant Road was moved back up to 50 feet in the middle, and that exposed land that was formerly a combination of city and private right-of-way. The first 25 feet are still owned by us because you own up to the middle of the road, and then it's just the part out after that that is city. So the city has decided that they no longer need to continue the right-of-way for easements in that area as city-owned easements. They'd be easements on private land. So what the changes were from the original plan till now is last time we came here, it was turned down because the planning board and the city engineer had tabled it, and it decided not to go forward because the utilities were not shown on the plan before. So although we had the sewer and the drain, did not have gas, electricity, and water shown. The second thing was that we had to have agreements actually with those utilities, because when you change from a publicly owned piece of land, the easement on there apparently is subtly different from the easement on private land. So the utilities had to go along and buy into that. So we had to go coordinate with the utilities, get their agreement. In one place, we had to sign an actual easement with them. So, and that was done for both 119 and 121 Conant Road. And then, so that was one change. Another one was we actually found out that the road You can't draw the boundary. I mean, 119 is easy, that's completely self-contained. But where 121 and 123 border each other, that border, we had actually, it must be drawn by state statute as a perpendicular to the road to the pin of the existing corner of the property. So there's no variation in that, but our surveyor had picked the wrong road. He picked the new road, which is obviously there. The discontinuance of the right-of-way was the right-of-way of the old road when the road was moved. That's the right-of-way that had to be moved. So we had to change the boundary, or our surveyor had to change the boundary on the plan from perpendicular to the new road back to perpendicular to where the old road was, to the center line of the old road. So that moved the property back, and that actually we lost, in front of 121 Conant Road, we lost about 200 square feet of property that then went to the area in front of 119, I'm sorry, in front of 123 Conant Road. So they actually gained about 200 square feet in front of their property, but that's city land, that's not theirs. So those are the main changes that went through, and that was reviewed by legal. And it was reviewed by the city engineer, reviewed it with the entire engineering staff, the DPW, and legal reviewed it to make sure that this is done properly and correctly. So those are the main changes. Oh, and then a pedestrian easement was also added. So if you look, there's 6 amendments on there on the right. That's what each of those was, because you also had to mark where the pedestrian easement is, where the sidewalks go, where that's allowed. So all of that's now shown on there. City engineer said, yep, you're done. And he signed off, and the planning board said, yep, we concur. So that's where it is. Are there any other questions? Those are the main differences between the last plan that you saw last time and this one.
I will allow questions by any member of the board if they so wish. This is a particular delicate matter. Go ahead, Alderman Lopez.
I mean, that answered my question and the other one. Where's the utilities, and are we giving away some of these water lines? So that was actually very helpful. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay.
And may I just say, you can be really proud of your city staff, the engineering staff. We knew nothing going into this, but Engineer Dukran and Mark Jennings and all the engineering staff and the legal that they reviewed, Alderman Jetty got us in contact with them, gave us the ordinances, and you can really be proud of their capabilities. Thank you.
We should
Very
certainly
good. We'll
recognize
pass that on. Thank you. Does anybody else have any testimony they would like to give to this particular matter? Miss? Please come up and just what we discussed before. Thank you.
I just have some pictures, if I may, to share.
You may pass it out to everybody.
Thank you.
This is a clearer picture. This is what he's talking about.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
This is not a map, it's a picture of the.
Could I have 2, please? Could I have 2?
I give you one more.
Yeah, for the record.
Oh, I can.
That's okay.
I can
That's
give
okay.
mine, so that'll be fine.
Thank you.
So we can share, yeah. We can share it,
We can share.
absolutely.
So that's,
No problem.
so that's 123. That's that
Right.
one.
So that picture is actually a picture of 123 and 124. I took it across the street, and it just shows you a little bit. I know we have the map, but it shows you kind of what it looks like in person in life. So good evening. My name is Patty Falbo-Tupin. I'm with my husband, Dan. We reside at 123 Conant Road. We have lived there for 27 years. We love Nashua, love our home. Last time I spoke, I shared the reasons why my husband and I did not join the petition for discontinuance and why we opposed it. A little background. Prior to the developments 27 years ago, the house that was there before was run down and unoccupied, during which time we maintained the area around the telephone pole. You'll see the telephone pole. Which then was the road, by pruning the bushes and plowing the street to allow safe delivery of the mail and for us to back out of our driveway. Then the road was moved 15 years ago, as we talked about, as part of the Maplewood development. And we've taken care of the added frontage, as well as the property adjacent to our driveway, as if it was our own for the entire time. You can see that with the different colors of the lawn. We maintained that area for 15 years. We understand that the planning board has given their approval for the discontinuance, and this is the final stop in the decision-making, so we know how important my testimony and today's meeting is. So the reason why we strongly oppose the discontinuance is where the proposed property line separating our property and 121 Conant Road has been drawn. Now, I know we have the dashed line, just because of the changes, it's going to be a little bit different. It's not exact, but it gives you an idea. Separating the property, 121 Conant Road has been drawn using standard guidelines. These are guidelines, ordinances, as Mr. Gilbertson spoke about, but they're not law. They're not, it's an important distinction, allowing this committee flexibility as you consider all the facts and concerns when you make your final decision and recommendation. Based on the proposed plan, 121 Conant Road's footprint, as they use it, would expand, and the footprint that we cared for all this time, as if it was our own, would shrink. The city property disputed is the land to the right of ours, next to the driveway. It's approximately 24 feet by 65 feet. Both 123 and 121 Conant Road observed the telephone pole and sign as boundaries. We always have. We've been maintaining the city's land as outlined in the pictures for over 15 uninterrupted years by mowing, seeding, fertilizing, watering, plowing, and for the last 3 years, maintaining a garden on it. There has never been a time when we didn't treat this land as our own. During the same period, approximately 15 years, our neighbors observed the same property separation, stopping the care of their land, referencing both the telephone pole and sign as boundaries. There was an overlap very early on. However, though I don't recall the exact conversation, I do unequivocally remember the outcome where we agreed that the telephone pole and the sign is boundaries. The idea that it was just picked up is untrue, as they once said. We feel very strongly that the proposed property line, moving it only arm's length from our driveway and primary use to our home, does not keep us whole. That's really important. It's not about, we lived there for 27 years, and the fact now it's going to shrink and we don't have that private space. And Alderman Lopez, you talked about earlier, about the space, about, the parking space and having space, someone park and you had somebody's window, your bedroom window. You talked about that space. That's what I'm talking about. We're talking about our personal livable space that's been encroached upon now. The personal living space that we've always had would be diminished, and I know that's not the city's intent. We believe that the picture show the city land and our land, how it fits together, given the configuration and maintenance use history. We also believe that the picture shows the agreed upon boundary lines. The trees 121 Conant Road planted and the grass maintenance all stop at the telephone pole. Also, the prior owners of 121 Conant Road recognized these boundaries as well when they installed the sprinkler system, or the sprinkler placement would be very different and more sprinkler heads would have been added to cover the 24 by 65 foot area. This is an amazing thing that happened to all of us, and there is no reason why anyone should be left negatively impacted. And we believe having the boundary move so close to our living space would do so unnecessarily. Even without the piece of land in question, 121 Conant Road are the recipients of the lion's share of the city's land. All we're respectfully asking is that the proposed property line be adjusted to include this land as part of 123 Conant Road. This adjusted configuration, though not a standard convention, would not be unique to Nashua, and it would reflect our stewardship of the city's land for over 15 years, and to some extent for as long as we've been there for 27 years. This land belongs to the city, and this committee can recommend an adjustment to the boundary line reflecting our stewardship for the entire time. And we're willing to compromise. We're willing to split the difference in halfway. I mean, we're willing to compromise. If you believe as we do that this is a great thing and no one should be left negatively impacted, we hope you will support and recommend some minor adjustment. We appreciate your time.
Mr. Gilbertson, would you be willing to compromise with your neighbor to, if we table this, continue to table it, and to see if there's some amicability that can come up between your two good neighbors here?
My name's Ed Gilbertson, 121 Conant Road, and no, it's in the, we were told that we couldn't even vary that line by the city engineer and by the legal staff,
That
even
is
to go
true.
from the
That
old
is
road to
true.
the new
Right.
road. There's no variance authorized. And the first 25 feet are owned by us, according to Attorney Bolton. So that's not city land. So that would be taking land from us and giving it to them, which I think is beyond the charter of the city. So that's part of it, and then the other part is just beyond the center line of the old road. That's where the question comes in. So we went through this whole discussion with Engineer Dukran, and he said the only way we could really do anything would be to sell them the land after it's transferred to us, because it's city land right now, and that's the only way we could actually come to any agreement, because it's our land legally. And the other.
Mr. Gilbertson, I'm going to allow you to have a seat, and Madam, please come forward. I'll allow you to have a seat, too. No, please come into the horseshoe.
These seats.
Alderman Lopez.
For the record, since the original comment was the same as last meeting, that this is a different Mr. Gilbertson than Mr. Cutter was referencing.
Yes, that's true.
Can you tell me where the,
Yes, Alderman Schmidt, yes.
can you tell me where the telephone pole actually is on the map? Is it on a line currently?
It's, there's a line coming down from.
Tell you what, if you could do it on here, you could point.
There's a line coming down from, here's the boundary between the two properties, 123 and 121 is deeded land.
Yeah,
And then here's where the city engineer and the legal office said that the boundary has to go to over in this new area.
right.
The telephone pole is over here a little bit. It's in about
Where the-
20 feet in from this boundary.
Well, that would
From that
really
pin.
change that line,
from
wouldn't
that
it?
pin.
Thank
That would
you.
really- and, yes.
So he's saying the pole is somewhere like here.
It's marked on the plan.
My clerk is going to show you where she has been indicated where the pole
I
is.
believe you telling me the pole is just at this spot right here, is that?
That's the boundary.
Oh,
That's
excuse
the
me,
boundary.
right,
Right there, yeah.
right,
That's
right
there.
about here.
Right about there.
Okay.
It's about 20 feet
If I could,
east.
Alderman Jettie.
so I'm looking at the plan on my little iPad here, and it's marked. If you blow up the plan, I don't know if you can or not, but you
Yeah, can
see.
we blow this up a bit more?
Where did we do that from, do you remember?
Control plus.
Tools.
Not that, tools.
No, yeah.
No, no, no.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
there we
yeah,
go.
yeah.
Nope,
No,
Control plus.
nope. I'm sorry, I'm not a.
There
I'm
you
not a
are, it's
Mac
on the bottom.
person.
Right there, right.
Plus,
Yeah.
okay.
Mhm.
And again, and grab it and pull it over. So it's right about there, yeah?
No, if you move, if you go up to, there you go, in that area.
Right
So if
about
you look,
there.
if you come down, you'll see there's a line that's labeled 12-inch water.
Yeah, right there.
Okay, so just above the E in water,
Right about
you'll
there.
see a circle. It says UP, that means utility pole.
Oh, there it is, okay, got it. Just above the A in water, okay. So it's here.
but you're under the impression, miss, that you think the utility pole was the boundary line, but that's not necessarily the case, because according to the city surveying, it's actually a couple feet.
We always use,
For a minute, this concerns me.
You may
because
come up and sit down too, please. And I'm allowing this is a little extenuating, but I would like to get this right, and,
My name is Melissa Gilbertson. I live at 121 Conant Road. When we first moved into our property, we had rented, my husband was still in the military. And at that time, Mr. Tupin and I had a discussion, and I originally went to that boundary marker. And Mr. Tupin said, no, go to the telephone pole. At that time, we were renting. I didn't want any, disagreement with neighbors, so I agreed to that. But now seeing where the property marker is, it has always been there. And the thing is that's why when we went through the engineering, that's why they have the boundary. It has to go through there by state statute. It has to go from the boundary line of the property.
perpendicular to the street.
Yes, of
And-
the
and
old
this is
road.
what I'm saying to you, ma'am. No matter what by local law or how you felt or good things with neighbors and everything, I have heard of this situation before, but we have to refer to it what is really part of what the surveyor has done and what is going by the official city mapping here. So it shows the telephone pole wasn't really the legitimate. It may have been the landmark, but it wasn't really the legitimate boundary line.
And our sprinklers the sprinklers on that end, we have a smaller, because we wanted to save water, our sprinklers will reach that new
Okay.
area.
I think you would like to say something, yes?
If we're talking about the sprinklers, the fact that they will reach it is different than that's what it would have been placed if it was looked at as part of that land. So so yes, they could turn it on high and have it reach that area, but if someone was laying out that sprinkler system, it would not have been laid out the way it is. There would be
Right.
more head. No. I'm just talking
Right,
about that.
and that's not a-
And so.
Right.
And so I'm just responding to that piece of it. I think I'm, of the spirit of this.
Okay.
It's the gain of the land. So there wasn't any land before. So now because of the road is moved, there was land, and just the way of the configuration, it was just a natural. As you could see, it was just natural for us to take care of that land, and so yes. When they moved the land, I didn't look at. We just looked at what was natural, and we always used the telephone pole and the sign as the boundaries where we would stop. And we cared for the land for so long. To have it now, and we lived there for 27 years. To have it now not feel like our space has been encroached upon. That doesn't feel right, and I don't know, and we maintained for 15 years. That's a long time, and I believe that it's being brought as an issue now because of the 20 year no, and so. It just doesn't feel right. And, we're going to fight the good fight. We're bringing it up. And we don't feel like it's good neighborly. We've been good neighbors for all this time. And for them to do this, it's sad. It's sad. But is there anything, I'm just asking as a resident, is there anything that we could do? Is there anything that... any compromise,
Right.
any...
And would like to
For
pause
15
for a
years,
second.
do we-
When anybody speaks, because we don't know, they know our voices, but we don't necessarily know yours. So reintroduce yourself, please.
Absolutely.
When you do speak. When it comes down to something like this, ma'am, I think what we got to do is looking at the letter of the law. And it seems that the people of 121 do have the right to come up to petition. And what will happen is basically, I guess the city will enact a quick deed with them. This will go from ceasing to be non-taxable city property to basically coming out to be taxable city property. They will be paying extra on that because their land acreage or, the landlord has changed. So what was the moving of Connet Road, well, now this land will come up to go back to private use and it will be part of the tax structure. So that's a positive thing for the city. As far as your other question, saying what amicable type of things, we really like to have you two neighbors kind of work it out, and this is the reason why I called you up here. It is my hope, because we have to rule on letter of law, but it is my hope that these good people, on your request, would probably come up and talk to you as good neighbors would do. And I know this is a contentious issue for now, but I am hoping that as we go along in the future, that they could come up and say, look, I want to do this, any real major objections as one things kind of do in any good neighborhood. If I have a little fire in my campfire in the backyard, neighbor, I'll get the permit from the fire department, but if the neighbor complains about it, I put it out. That's being a good neighbor. And I'm just saying, I hope that they would, give the promise to perhaps do that and establish communication with you.
This is Patty Felber-Tupin, 123 Conant Road. Before any of this, they did come to our home. They spoke to my husband, and my husband did ask them, because he just planted his garden, his tomato plants. He said, is there any negotiations? And they said no. Flat out said no. So unless they're going to change today, unless
Not true. Melissa Gilbertson, 121 Conant Road.
Okay,
We were-
can I caution here?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
I just wanna-
everything is basically a done deal as far as I'm concerned. What happened kind of in the past. I don't want this to have them Hatfields and McCoys.
No.
Sure.
I just
So
want,
the thing
if
is,
there is-
I like to stay strictly based upon the facts. What I want to,
Because she came over my house, said, move you guys.
and sir, can you come to the microphone and identify yourself?
May I
No.
suggest that we're making this a more difficult
I'm gonna-
situation
Right.
by including everybody in the
Tupin.
city of Nashua in the
Right,
conversation?
but who are you, sir, in relation?
I live at 123 Conant Road. It's my wife Patty. When they came over to my house to show me the plans, they said basically what they talked about from the property marker along the line. And they asked me to move the garden. They asked me to move my plants. And I think some of that came about because I asked them to leave my house after that. So
Okay.
I don't think there's going to be any,
But do you
Measure.
have as members of, do you have any legal, I mean, the law says that the property line has, in the purchase, has to go perpendicular to the street. We can't variant from that. It's impossible. We'd be breaking our law.
but the point is she was telling me to move things before the
before.
committee had voted on this.
no, that's,
Okay,
That is
I
true.
don't want,
That's- yeah.
excuse me,
That's not
sir.
relevant to this
Sir, that's a
conversation.
little bit more information. The thing is, I'm looking as just a matter of law on this.
yes.
No, it's closed. We're closed. We're done.
Okay, I understand. And thank you for your comment. But do you have anything as a matter of law on this that you can bring up?
Everything I read is that 20-year, is that, whether it is, now I drew a blank about,
Adverse possession.
adverse possession, but we would never have done adverse possession because it wasn't adverse. If we did anything, it would be acquiescence. So acquiescence of city, meaning there was an agreed upon boundary, which is why we always say that the telephone pole and the sign was the boundary that we always did. That would go into effect if it was 20 years. That's the only thing that I read. It's sad. And again, we would compromise if it was just not so close, because literally this the driveway is our main, it's not the side yard. That's our main way we go to our house. That's our main entry point to our home. And as you could see in the picture, right now there's a nice buffer, that we could play basketball, the ball could go behind, there's just a nice buffer. Now it's even, it's so close, and they're right there, and it just, we feel like that private space, that space is not there anymore. And legally, I don't know what else we could say. I just wanted to share what we have done for 15 years. And it's too bad that we can't compromise, even if it's a little bit, so we have that buffer. I would have liked to have seen that. It didn't seem like there was any wiggle room with that. And this is Patty Falber-Tupin from 123 Conant Road.
All right. Does any member of the board have any particular question? Alderman Gedge.
Who owns the land right now? Do the city own the land or something?
The city one time, the city now owns the land.
Then don't sell it.
Huh?
Then don't sell it.
That would be reflected in your vote.
Okay.
Except the first 25 feet up to the center line of the old road is, Attorney Bolton has said that's our property.
Yeah.
Could you identify yourself or what you?
I'm sorry, Edward Gilbertson at 121 Conant Road.
So could you clarify what Attorney Bolton stated?
Attorney Bolton said that the land up until the center line of the old road is actually owned by the people who, in front of there. It would have been the person we bought the land from, which would have been our landlord at the time, Amos White Properties. So that land is owned by us
And the only,
already.
Melissa Gilbertson, 121 Conant Road, the only land that would be in question would be where it varies out there. There's not that much more land there. That's where the sidewalk and things are. And when we did go and look at this, when we talked with Engineer Dukrin, we also surveyed 123 and 68 McKenna so that they would have the chance to see what type of land that they could receive. They also, if they went along, with this, which we went partial because they said no, they would receive 4,000, I think it's 200 square feet. That would be in the front of their house.
Instead of the land in front
The
of us.
question, the question being is, this whole thing is where this property line is, to the right of it, as I'm looking at it, they've placed the 3 gardens. That's what they want to keep. And it's basically within our boundary line. And we asked, when we checked with Engineer Dukrin, we asked, can this be moved? And Engineer Dukrin said no, because once the boundary is set with state law and things like that, you have to go through the boundaries. We weren't ogres and trying to kick people off property. We weren't.
Can I, for clarification, just for clarification, my name is Patty Felber-Tupin, 123 Conant Road. What I don't understand is the thought that we could buy the land off them, but it can't happen before that. I don't get that, because you said something about first it goes to them and then it goes to us, or if we chose to buy the land. I'm not understanding, why is it okay then? Like, I'm not getting that a little bit.
From what I understand, they're going to purchase the land off the city, and then it'll become their land. And at that particular point, if they so choose to enter into negotiations with you, and you can make an offer to come together. This is what I mean. That's part of the amicable solution, in my opinion.
But my point is, I don't understand why it would be okay at that point, and we can't do that beforehand. Like,
I can answer that. I can answer that. Part of it is because the land they're interested is actually owned by us. It's up till the center line of the old road.
Right.
So there's no, so the city can't.
Is that like an official own, they officially own it, or is it just kind of like a, because it, I'm sorry?
I have to talk to Attorney Bolton. He said
Was
that.
adjusted?
Alderman Gedge.
Has there been taxes? Have you been paying the taxes on it?
Not yet, but we will start as soon as the quitclaim deed goes
No,
through.
but have you
update our
been
deed.
paying taxes on it?
We've been paying
on the
from
deeded land,
the
yes.
deeded land.
Okay, have you taken care of it? Who's
Yes.
cared for it?
We have a sprinkler system that covers the entire area of Area B. We water, we fertilize, we mow, we do all of the, the watering, you know, it's all, and we pay the bill for the watering.
Patty Felber-Tupin, 123 Conant Road. On the picture that I gave you, we take care of that. And so I don't know if that's the land that they're talking about, but that picture and that spot where it's outlined, we take care of that currently.
Mr. Chair?
Okay,
We have to grant the petition for the amended plan.
okay, then I'm gonna ask you. All right, Alderman Gidge?
I think something is wrong. I understand, I'd like to see what Bolton, the attorney came up with, number one, and number two is, if the land is not sold to anyone, then maybe something can be worked out beforehand. I don't understand this. If this is correct, looking at this is kind of sad in a sense. I could be wrong. Yes, Ms. Sorry.
Alderman Jettie?
Maybe it would assist Alderman Gidge for him to understand that that originally all of this property belonged to a landowner. And when the city established Conant Road, I'm talking a long, long time ago, they acquired this land from that landowner in order to put the road in. And so the land originally belonged to their predecessor in title. And the city established Conant Road. At some point in time, the city moved Conant Road, so it used to be closer to their land, to their houses. And when the Maplewood area was developed, they straightened the road out and moved it farther away from these houses. So the city no longer had need for that right-of-way for the old Conant Road. And so when the city has no need for the land, it reverts back to the original landowner. So the Gilbertsons, who own Lot 121, their property line, you know, that black line that, you know, is between Lot 121 and Lot 123, that's their property line. And at the bottom, there's an iron pin or a stone bound, an iron pin. That's their property line. Now, for the Tupins, who own the adjacent property, 123, the land that they put their flower beds on is between that property line and the telephone pole. It's an area of about 10 feet. So the area that they put their raised beds on is about 10 feet in from the property line. So in order to what the law says is, according to Attorney Bolton, is that when the city no longer needs this right-of-way, it can discontinue the right-of-way and the property reverts back to the original landowners. Now, the original landowner owned both of these properties and more property than that. So there's a rule that says you draw the line from that iron pin indicating the property line between 123 and 121, perpendicular to the old road, and that rightfully reverts back to the owner of 121, and that's what they're asking for.
Mr. Chair, was that property paid for when it was sold? When the city took it, did they pay for it? Do you know? If they paid for it, then it was no longer anyone's property other than the city, so the city itself changed the boundary. So I don't think, I'm sure Attorney Bolton is correct, and I'm sure you're correct, but I'd like to see it, because if something is sold to the city owns it, and by the nature of the ownership, it changes the boundary itself. So to turn and say, it just goes back to the same people, they got paid for it, so then if gets to the point where neighbors are going over a small piece of property, then why should the city sell it then? What's the sense? Would it be $100 a year more in taxes?
Yeah, it's negligible.
I mean, I think neighbors, can't they agree to something before we make a point of selling it? Because the city owns it. You don't own the property. Right. And whoever owned the property before was paid for it. So all of a sudden the city changed the boundaries. What you're saying is, okay, this is where the line was, so you own it. Well, I don't see it necessarily that way completely. I'd like to see what Attorney Bolton had come up with.
Was that a question to anybody in particular?
That's a statement, and
Okay, very good. Where it wasn't a question, shouldn't have a reply. Alderman Lopez.
I think we should just vote on this. I think the state created this rule and these guidelines specifically to avoid having the city have to weigh in on a civil matter between neighbors. We're not equipped to do it. We're not judges, so I think we should be following the law and doing our role as aldermen. And if anything, we should be conscious of the contribution we're making to the rift between neighbors who generally seem to get along pretty well. The longer we drag this out, the more frustration there's going to be on both sides, the more, lawyering up there's going to be. And the clearest resolution that Attorney Bolton identified, and he's the city attorney, I trust his judgment, was process this and let the neighbors work out if they want to sell pieces of land otherwise or not. But I think when the city starts making up its own rules, we get the last Gilbertson cutter incident, and it'll go on for the next 30 years. I think we need to follow the rules that were set the way we're supposed to and not get super creative.
The only thing I would add is that...
Identify yourself, please.
One,
And
two,
this
three.
is the last. I
Absolutely.
have to end it at this.
Absolutely. Patty Falber-Tupin, 123 Conant Road. The only thing that I would add is that when I asked about, is it the law, they said it's a guideline. And I have an email that says that, it's a guideline. So that's what I was hoping, that somehow we can come to some agreement where it's just not 5 feet right by our driveway. That's all.
Right. All right. And I think under the advice of Alderman Lopez, in so many words, he says kind of to move this vote, which I am in favor of. But however, being the chair, I totally appreciate the delicateness of this discussion.
before you take a vote,
Because-
can I table this?
Pardon?
Before you take a vote, can I table this?
After I'm done, I will recognize you for a motion.
Thank you. Thank
Okay. But I understand that this is a very delicate in nature and with, neighbors and everything else. That's why I took liberty that all people, all citizens have the right to be heard. And we heard your case, and depending upon, we're going to have a motion pending on this to go, and we'll see. So I'm going to ask you, hope you appreciate that we did hear you, we listened to you, and thank you for your testimony. And I'm going to ask you please to go back to the seats. Thank you so much. Just a general discussion. I think I have a hint of what you want to do, and that motion is always in order. But this is not the only board that this appeared to, just to give you the history. If you wish to do that, fine. This also went before the planning board. It was discussed with the city attorney, meets with his approval. It was discussed with the city engineer, meets with his approval. It's to the point now that a decision needs to be made, okay?
Can I have a point of order?
Point of order.
This isn't where we make the decision. This is where we recommend final passage.
So
So if there are questions about what Attorney Bolton did or did not know, we could absolutely bring that up in the Board of Aldermen, because we did go back and forth with the law ordinance several times. So this is not the final argument.
Right,
This is
correct.
just
Thank
our
you.
recommendation for the full board.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Thank you.
But
True point of
I believe
order.
a table supersedes before the vote.
I,
No,
like I
there's a
said,
vote
I
on the
will
table.
recognize you. A tabling motion is always in order.
I wish not.
Alderman Gedge.
Thank you. I wish not to table this. I just, I'm getting more information. I just think it's so unfair. Somebody takes care of property for so long, the city buys it, and then it's sort of, by law, reverts right back to the other people. It's just, law or not, to me, it's not fair. I will vote against it, but I will not
Right, and
ask to table it.
that is the Alderman's prerogative,
That's right.
absolutely. Any final comment before I call for the vote? Alderman Lopez.
Don't build a fence. That's all I'm saying.
Very good.
Please.
All right, will the clerk please read the motion with a recommendation,
I
please?
move to recommend granting the petition for the proposed amended plan.
Okay. The motion before us is granting the position with the proposed amended plan. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
One opposed. The motion for granting has been granted and it'll be forward to the board. Okay, thank you all. Okay. General discussion by the Alderman? Alderman
Yes,
Gedge.
just one thing before everybody leaves. Neighbors and land is probably the worst. I've gone through this. I think everybody's gone through it. Don't build a fence. Have cookouts, enjoy each other, because it's just hell to go through this. And my voting against it is more protest than sensibility by law. And it's just giving me this moment to say, please, please, this would be very helpful. No offense, well,
No offense.
I hope you understand. It is frustrating for everybody.
And
Thank you, Mr.
thank you. And if I may also like to thank my Vice Chair, Alderman Lopez, for his recognizing decorum procedures. Thank you. Thank you. Any other comment by the Alderman? Okay. Seeing none, public comment. Anybody from the public would like to come up and discuss? Seeing none. Any remarks by the Alderman? Okay, seeing none. There is no need for a possible non-public session.
Done.
Alderman Lopez, do you have a motion?
Make a motion to adjourn?
There's a motion to adjourn. So Infrastructure Committee will adjourn at 8:22.